Hello everyone, I'm Reno Zero. We are back again talking about one specific detractor, one specific hater of mine who seems to always want to comment on every single type of post I put out, or he wants to quote tweet everything I put out, even though I have him muted on Twitter. And I personally haven't really paid attention to him in quite a while. But for some reason, he felt the need to poke his head out when I mentioned that people simply can't figure out what ISOM's powers were in ISOM number 1, even though it's blatantly obvious what it actually is for anyone who actually paid attention, who actually read the comic. And that person would be Tism Spencer, the same guy who looks like his brain is trying to escape his skull because he can't stop thinking about retarded crap. The same guy who said that the Horseman welcomed the Florist Park, that one of the pros in the book was that the Horseman had a manhood that he wishes he had, that he was jealous of, because of course the dude is self-classified as a pansexual according to himself, because he wants to call everybody else a weirdo, but for some reason he isn't a weirdo for being considered pansexual. But that would explain why his wife doesn't put out, and that would explain why he's always so angry on Twitter, which is what I say about a lot of these guys who claim to have wives at home. These are the same guys I always say that clearly their wives aren't giving out, so they sit there and they air out all their frustrations on Twitter with random people online while I sit there and monetize their stupidity. But we are going to start here, of course, with the pre-order collection for Norfolka Glorious Death number 1, sitting at 52 days left to go, at 192,935 in total sales, at 4,547 total books sold. Now, just recently, Saints and Sinners number 1 did wrap up. I think it had somewhere over 500K and over 13,000 books sold. Now, it's also interesting that the old throat goat himself is now copying the way that Eric puts out his stuff, where he shows the book sold with an entire graphic, and I'm sure that EVS doesn't really pay. You know, that's just my opinion. I don't think he pays the person for those graphics. I think he probably draws it himself and possibly does it himself. But I think it's absolutely hilarious watching this guy have a meltdown over the fact that I told another dude that he doesn't know anything about ISOM or his powers. So, suffice it to say, this guy says, I guess Enlightened Fan hasn't read Rippaverse comics, even though he's done multiple reviews on his Twitter page of all 3 ISOM books. So make it make sense, because you're that much of a moron, as it is with most of these idiots who claim that the people that buy the comics don't actually read the comics. I'm sure there are people that just bought the comics just to support Eric, but I feel like for the most part, most of us bought the comics to actually read them and not just have them sitting in a box. I've basically read 95% of it. I have to catch up on the other 3 books that I haven't read yet, but in due time. I guess Enlightened Fan hasn't read Rippaverse comics, or is so illiterate he doesn't understand good storytelling. A guy with vague superpowers has a lousy couple of days is pretty much ISOM 1. That's actually not how that book went down. That's how I can tell you didn't read it. Nothing about it was memorable. Show don't tell is the rule in writing, and Eric failed at that. To which I responded by saying, the fact that you couldn't figure out ISOM's powers without it being told to you is pretty telling, because they were very obvious just by reading the book, which I do say what they are later in the video. If the power set has to be spoon-fed to you, which Eric stated when creating the universe that he wasn't going to do that, because these are guys that have literally probably seen Eric talk about how he wasn't going to spoon-feed the powers. Or at least I'd hope that that's the case, but obviously not. Did you actually read the book? Because he specifically has told people in the past that he's not going to spoon-feed the audience. He wants the audience to be smart enough to figure it out themselves, and for the most part, pretty much anyone who's actually read ISOM number 1 was able to figure out the power set that ISOM has. And you also had Chloe down here. She says, we get it, bro. You can't figure it out. The Tism makes it too hard to deduce the nature of ISOM's powers. To which, like I said, I have this clown muted. He says, no one, including you, knows what ISOM's powers are. I actually do know what ISOM's powers are, but it's interesting to me how you don't respond to this tweet right over here. We'll get into it. In fact, his powers changed from the original release to the remaster and in the 3rd volume. So if no one has any idea what ISOM's powers are, then how did ISOM's powers change from one book to another if you never knew what the powers were in the first place? You see why you sound stupid when you type? He wasn't even an except. He actually is an except. But let's continue. So how does anyone even know what his powers are? What does isometrics mean in the context to how his abilities work? You don't. Please prove me wrong by saying what his actual powers are. I know you can't, so thanks for being a moron as always. But you're one of those people that doesn't like people to answer. You like to ask rhetorical questions and then claim that everyone's dumber than you are, but you're the most retarded person online when it comes to Rippaverse comics or anything in indie. To which I say, literally, super strength, super speed, enhanced durability, and regeneration. It wasn't hard to follow for me. Tism's brain is always trying to escape his skull. It's no wonder he couldn't figure it out. Chloe goes on to say, I'll at least give him a gold star for figuring out that the word isometric is a hint. Jack Walker, quote, I can't figure it out, so no one can. Dunning-Kruger Tism. If you continue on, there are literally other people. You have Trelly right here saying it was pretty easy to follow. Super strength, enhanced durability, senses, and accelerated healing. The problem is they are stupid and can't use context clues. Yeah, that's the problem. These are the same types that claim that I have a reading comprehension problem, yet they can't figure out Isom's powers based on the first book. How the fuck is Isom's power such a miss for these retards? Mofos didn't pick up the book. He literally pulls off feats of the following, and this is off the top of my head, as it's been a minute since I read Isom 1 and 2. English isn't this person's first language, by the way. But before I'm assuming the big review of Isom number 3 of more of his powers, he has displayed the following feats in books 1 and 2. Super strength, superhuman durability, minor regeneration, super speed and reactions. These are a few things right off the bat of Isom's powers from just the first 2 books of feats he has shown, and I probably missed a few of them. Isom's powers are very much not vague at all, and if one had read the books, they would see that there are many feats scattered throughout it. So literally you have multiple people who have actually read these books that can figure out Isom's powers, but for some reason, the clowns who have been hating on the Rippaverse for the last 3 years, as I've documented this for the last 3 years since 2022, they can't seem to figure it out, but it seems like anybody else around them can figure it out, so you can go ahead and see yourself out, Tism Spencer, because you got absolutely BTFOed even by a person that English isn't their first language. So for you to sit there and say that nobody can figure out the powers, clearly multiple people in my own thread can figure out the powers for themselves just by simply reading the books, which it's clear to me that none of you clowns have actually ever read these books whatsoever because you couldn't figure out Isom's powers. As I said earlier, Eric is not going to drip feed the powers to anyone about any character. He would think he's, to himself, knows that his audience is smart enough to figure it out. Clearly the people who are not in his audience, who are only there to hate on myself for calling out the hypocrisy and the BS, and the people who aren't really there for the indie comic space aren't going to be able to figure it out because they're not really there in good faith. They're there to talk crap all the time. Just remember, Tism Spencer is the same guy who claimed Yaira number 1 wasn't going to hit 1 million, and it hit 1 million in under 12 hours, faster than Isom number 1 did. Then he had to shift the goalposts. He also claimed the book was late, even though it launched in winter, but launched for pre-order in winter, but I digress. This is all you're really going to get from me. It's about little over 8 minutes. So thank you all for checking out this video. I really do appreciate all the new subscribers, returning subscribers, and viewers and return viewers. If you do like this video, smash the like button. Comment below if you feel about this. Subscribe for more content. Hit the bell for notifications. Set the bell to all. That way you'll get a notification anytime I post a new video or go live on the channel. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.